to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
We welcome you to the third week in our series entitled Beyond Darkness, A Human Response. Our topic today under that heading will be the long road to nowhere, a bag lady's experience, and we're particularly going to deal with the issue of the homeless in the United States. We're very fortunate to have on our program today Beulah Lund, who is a Spokane area farm wife, and after years of dealing with these kind of issues, she decided to try an experience that was very, very difficult, I'm sure, but was most informative, and she will discuss that today. In 1986, she went to Washington, D.C., and for 6 weeks, she was a bag lady and had very touching and very informative experiences during that time. Her work has been recognized by all the media in this country and even in other countries, and she's in the process, I understand, of writing a book, and she has worked very hard to deal with this problem. And with her work and others, it resulted in a recent billion-dollar bill that was passed by the Congress of the United States. Beulah Lund, it's a pleasure to have you on our program, and we look forward to discussing this very important topic with you today.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to have two members of the panel to assist in questioning our guest today. To my left is Steve Shink, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College, and next to him is panel member Glenn Walker, who for 10 years was prosecuting attorney of Kootenai County. I shall ask Steve Shink to commence the questioning.
Thank you, Tony. Mrs. Lund, you took 6 weeks of your life at your own choosing and did something that most of us would very, very much like to avoid. It's a fascinating concept, and we're very anxious to talk to you about that. But maybe we could go back just a little bit and learn some more about you personally and see what led up to this decision. Could you tell us just a little bit about your background?
Well, I just call myself a Mrs. Anybody. I'm a homemaker, and I've had a real fulfilling life with foster children. We've had 27 years with hard-to-place foster kids. And so when we went to New York on a vacation trip with a family and to Washington, D.C., I guess I had lived a very cozy existence because I was just appalled. And I think the reason, too, being that we had our exchange student from Sweden with us, and I was trying to defend it, and I couldn't find the answers. And through the summer, I tried and tried to find things to read on and to give him a better outlook on America before we sent him back to his own country. And there wasn't much written at that time. And finally, I just decided I would have to go to be one of them for just a short while. I never gave myself, so many days. I could come home at any time. I think that was a key answer to it, too.
How did your family and friends react to that decision?
Well, they thought it was crazy, and it probably was. It is bizarre, and I guess that's why people picked up on it. I didn't mean for it to be, real public. It was kind of just a personal thing that needed to be done. And it caught the press, and because it was, different, it went on from there.
Was this truly a personal quest, or did you have any backing or any association with an educational organization or a philanthropic group of any kind?
Just my family, philanthropic, yes, my family is. But no, it was just my own quest. It became public by talking to the head of the psychology department at Whitworth, and he's a friend of ours and his wife. And I go to her for things, over lunch that puzzle me, and she comes to me for whole wheat bread recipes and things like that. And when they found out that I was going to go, they thought it would be interesting for Dorothy Power from the Chronicle to hear about it. And I was fine, But she called me in and said, could we report on this, what you see? And I thought that would be okay, not dreaming in a million years that it would be caught up in the press like it was. And it's confusing to me even still today because I'm not the real life issue at all.
Knowing what you know now about the experiences that you had, would you do it again?
I don't know. I really can't say. I think I couldn't have lived hardly with myself not doing it. I really became just really preoccupied with the whole idea all summer long. And maybe it's my age, you know, maybe it's a midlife crisis of my own little sort. You know, I wanted to find life in a different area or what. I have no idea, but I just knew it had to be quenched.
Glenn Walker.
Well, Beulah, most of us in this country don't begin to understand the problem of the homeless. And I guess that's why you went, because you didn't really have the answers either. But you went from a very, very nice, comfortable, middle-class life virtually to like another planet.
It was.
Tell us a little bit about what it was like, the fear you may have felt. I've seen some of the things you've done since, and I know that you've done a tremendous service to our country in informing us about these things. Tell us a little bit about it.
Fear was my best ally. When I was fearful, I, was keenly aware of what was around me. You need to realize that that's a very taxing thing too on a person. And when you see these people looking like zombies, it's because of that in a way. And you never are able, when you're living on the street, to sleep in that deep third stage sleep that we go into. You sleep with your body, but never your mind.
Were
and
you frequently waking up in that time period?
I still do. I have trouble turning that off. Your survival depends upon that, so you take it very seriously.
Were you in danger frequently?
I was probably in danger always. You cease to be human when you're on the street. People don't look at you as somebody to be respected as a life. And there's a lot of people that are perverted and weird out there too, and they take advantage of people that are in a weakened state. And everyone that's out there, all the women that I know at some time have been assaulted. And it just goes with the territory. And they become very raged with that, and there's spin-offs from that too.
You know, we all would like at times to know what others feel, what others think. There's no way that we can get inside someone else's skin, but perhaps you came about as close to that as one could in dealing with this issue of the homeless. Was there anyone who was watching over you, so to speak, or did you have a kind of a protectorate during any of this time?
I was really fortunate. I didn't have anyone really protecting me, but I did have someone contact me when I reached Washington, D.C. I promised my husband I would stay in a hotel for 2 days. He thought by then I'd be scared to death and come home. He told me later. But I was contacted by Mitch Snyder and Carol Finley, who are the head of, probably have done more for, as activists for the homeless cause than anyone else in the whole United States. And they asked, after they checked my sanity and found that I wasn't completely crazy, asked if they could use this as a focus on the homeless for the coming winter. They had hoped and prayed for someone to bring it into the focus of the public. And I said, well, sure, but I couldn't see where I would be of any good, for that. So I did have contact with them. Also, ABC Studio contacted me and said that the other reporters would back off if I would give Good Morning America an exclusive when I first came off the street. So I had contact with them. I left my things up at the bureau and came in and out of there. I disguised myself as a bag lady. I think the only sane thought I had when I left was I needed to blend in and be eccentric and as dirty as possible.
What's a bag lady mean?
That's just a terminology that's used because we all have to carry everything we own with us all the time on the street. Our possessions become very priceless, and also everything that we see becomes something meaningful. I was picking up twine, pieces of rope, plastic, nails, who knows what I wanted them for, but they looked very interesting, and I was feeling myself kind of departing from reality. But things became so precious. If they looked like they meant anything at all, I picked it up and put it in the bag, and I kept getting more things in my bag all the time.
Do you feel, Beulah, that your life as a bag lady was in fact very close to the exact same way that these homeless people live and feel?
Oh no, I could never say that because I had the love vibes coming from home. I could never be so conceited to ever think I really know what they're going through. I might know just a little more than you, but I could never know because I have a love from my family. Mm-hmm. I know they're there. I know that I will be supported in anything I do now, for sure. And I could never say that I really know. Like a friend of mine, Betty, I tried to understand where she was coming from, but I had no way of identifying. There wasn't the past that went with it.
Beulah, I want to show our audience a photograph of you that was taken. There's several here we have from AP and UP Wire Service, and this shows your dress and so forth when you were a bag lady in Washington, D.C., and I want our viewers to see that. I would like to move into some questions concerning some of the personal observations you had of the homeless on the streets of Washington, D.C. To our students at North Idaho College, you were very, very articulate in explaining this tragedy, and it truly is a tragedy, what happens to people. And I think to start that, if you don't mind, I would like to request that you read something that you have with you that was an experience that took place with one of the homeless people that you met,
Right.
and I understand it's going to be in your upcoming book. If you would introduce that and read it, I think it would send that message.
I would like to give a little background on it first. I was assaulted, and after I was assaulted, I found a real need to have somebody with me all the time, at night and especially. And I had a real liking for this young man that I found in Lafayette Park. He hung around where the tourists were so he could panhandle. He was 23 years old, and he had the sweetest spirit, but he was so spaced out, calling him my space cadet, because he was so spaced out on acid. And he would tell me, "Oh, boo, you better try this stuff. The trees talk to you and the flowers talk to you." I said, "Oh, great, that's all I need, Mark, is to have a tree talking at me." But I had a daughter 4 days younger than Mark, and I think that mother love was there. And after I was assaulted, I knew I had to have somebody with me. So I chose Mark, and I told Mark who I was. I knew that he wouldn't feel violated or exploited. When I told him who I was, he just said, "I knew you were a neat lady," you know, and I just felt so good about that. And he maybe didn't have it all together enough to feel exploited. But this is just one of the instances with Mark. And the thing I would like to emphasize today, too, is that these people are really beautiful people, most of them. There's a few that are very, well, if you get down to them, you really find a gentle spirit, but there's a covering. They've had so much pain in their background that there's a covering. And they would hurt you, probably. It isn't anything to go into lightly, and I don't suggest anyone doing that. But most of them, you know, are real people, real humans. A part of our humanity's out there, and we can't escape that. And that's what I would like to emphasize, and this might help it a little more, okay? This is called the coffee break. Mark was insistent on taking me to a cafe for coffee. At first I told him no, but when I saw the sting of my rejection, I realized this was a very special thing he needed to do. He had begged and accepted handouts from anyone and everyone he could, and now he was reaching way down inside of himself where the last measure of self-worth existed. How could I have been so rude and insensitive? So I said, "Of course, Mark, I would be honored." He seemed to grow taller before my eyes. I then realized a great truth. These people's self-esteem was measured by the need to be needed and valued. Mark then went to the first passerby and said, "Could you spare $1 for me and my lady a cup of coffee?" I think the gentleman thought, "My gosh, this bum brought his mom along, poor soul." He then handed Mark what looked like a quarter or a 50-cent piece. This was repeated quite a few times until I felt Mark had enough to treat half of Lafayette Park to coffee. Having your mother along is a good hit, and he knew it. I decided to get fully into the mother role and tell him, okay, you're done with the panhandling. Let's get over to McDonald's and get that ding-dong coffee. He had to stand in line for some time because the place was full of tourists. I slouched by the wall and tried to look invisible in all my glory, aroma, bags and all, and I did get pretty crusty and dirty, I might add. You would have thought Mark was ordering off a wine list in an elite restaurant. What class! He said in a very loud, assuming voice, "The lady and I will have 2 cups of coffee. Make it large with sugar and cream." Well, normally I detest anything but coffee in my coffee, but this was definitely not normally. On the street, you take all you can get with the handouts. The waitress handed him 1 cream and 1 sugar for each cup. He protested loudly. He wanted 6 cream and 6 sugar with each cup. I was surprised, but she didn't hesitate to get it for him. He took it with great ceremony and put it into his grimy pocket with whatever else lived there, and then strutted off to a booth by the window and door. I shuffled along behind him, meekly sat my bags down and in my rear. As I drank my coffee with the 6 sugar and 6 cream, I felt a sense of celebration. The coffee was delicious and the company delightful. My Mark, my bodyguard, my friend.
That is so excellent and so informative about the struggle itself. I'd like to ask one more question before going back to the panel members, and I think you are doing so much, as what Glenn indicated, for this country to bring the awareness of the problem. Could you give us a little more insight to some of the things that homeless people do face, other than the severe weather and the lack of food and the lack of shelter? You have mentioned earlier today, as people pass by and ignore humanity in this way, what it does to self-esteem and dignity.
Yeah.
Would you share some of that with us?
What really chips away, I don't know what is worse, to have somebody glower at you or to look through you. I never could figure out which was worse. I tried to analyze that. You have a lot of time to do that. But it chips away at one's spirit, and it just saps you of any motivation. And so pretty soon, to escape that pain of being treated as an extension of a sidewalk or whatever, or to be, bussed along, by a security guard, which their job depends upon what they do with you. After a while, you have to take drugs or booze just to cover that pain. And I don't know which comes first with a lot of them, but certainly with the single parents with children, I know that comes later, most always. Eviction does something for one too, to know that they can't even have a roof over their children's head. And we have out there today, at this very moment, if you took everyone out of Seattle, out of every duplex and every apartment and every house in Seattle, and just turned out the lights out of Seattle and brought the little kids in, I mean dependent children, not kids that can survive, there wouldn't be enough room for the kids that are out there today in America without a home and without a roof. And I think it's time for you and I and each one of us just to take responsibility, because I don't think only, it's going to come from a federal level, although we need all the help we can get, and local and state level, but it's going to be you and I helping that little mother down the street so she won't feel, just completely wrung out and do things that might cause harm to her children, or lose her home, or maybe not be able to heat the home, or that little grandma down the street that just lost her husband and can't hardly make it on one Social Security, I call it insecurity check, a month. You and I can do that, and I didn't know I could ever make a difference, but we all can. We can by just assuming the responsibility it's there. There's people that will milk the system, and they will do it all their lives, but these are not the people that milk the system, or they wouldn't be there.
Thank you. Steve Sheen.
You told Mark about your real identity. Did you tell anyone else?
No, I didn't dare.
Not even when you were leaving?
Not when I was leaving.
And do you know what's become of Mark, or the woman Betty that you mentioned, or
I've
any
been
other
back
people?
14 times, for different things, to the East Coast, and back and forth. And I see him, and I see my friends, but I don't look like I did. And Mark is so loyal; he would never tell. There's been a couple of others that I told later, but they have come out of the shelter now, and I just feel that it would harm them. They might know later that I was there to help them. And by the way, I'm collaborating on a book. I'm not a writer. I just wrote a journal each day. I don't even claim to be that at all. But the director of research for Time Life Books approached me and said that you can be one voice and you can't reach everyone, but a book can. So I've agreed on that.
Was life on the street strictly a matter of individual survival? Did you have to panhandle or go through garbage cans to exist, or were there any social service agencies that helped you and others as street people?
Well, I found it was easier not to go to agencies such as soup kitchens and that after a while, because it was so dehumanizing to stand in line as a woman. You're just really pushed and pinched and goosed and hugged and breathed on and everything. So I ate out of garbage cans a lot, but I had a favorite spot. I was across the street from a big business area, and the girls would come out with their pasta salads from the deli and everything, and pretty soon they saw me diving into the garbage can after it, and I ate pretty good. I had tuna sandwiches and fruit salads, and pretty soon they started leaving brownies for me and did pretty good. I ate sometimes at some, which others might eat. It's called some. They had a better security there that wouldn't allow that type of thing. And I might add that a lot of these people do not have it together enough to go through the reams of red tape to apply for services. And if they do, they might have to go clear across the town to another place to apply for something else, and to take two little kids and carry them that far, back and forth. It just becomes so huge in their mind that they can't even face it. They just would rather just live for the moment. You begin to feel just you can only survive and live for the moment. And that's a lot of the reason why they will drink, because they don't think of tomorrow, because it's too painful. They'll take that money that they might get some small check, and then they'll apply it on drugs or drink, and we can't be too critical of that, because they're only thinking of getting to feel better for right now.
Beulah, I just wanted to say that I thoroughly enjoyed your address to the students in the convocation. It was one of the most enjoyable hours that I have spent, and I did not expect that would be the case when I came down there. But you do an excellent job. One of the things you mentioned to the students was a statement that when someone gives someone something for nothing, that they take something from them.
Right.
I would like for you to tell us a little bit about your views on values and accountability, and what we can do for them, and how these people can, if they can, bring themselves out of this.
They can't bring themselves out of it.
They cannot.
They cannot. They need us. But we don't do a hand out. We do a hand up. And the people that I've talked to in the case studies that I've been doing all over shelters all over America, that's what they want. They don't want to be patronized, and they do not want to have a handout, because they want to feel good about themselves. And they might have to take it for a short time, but they want to tell you that if you will help put me through this class and do daycare for me, apply that to the daycare or whatever that you might be giving them as a church or as a private individual or as a government. They feel much better about that.
Can you tell us a little bit about, if you were in that, had that burden and that position, so that you could yourself really do something and take a direction, give us a direction, what would it be? What as a nation, in your opinion, do we need to do about this problem? What would the role of government be?
Again, I think we are all needed in that. The role of government could be more low-cost housing. First off, we've got to get people in shelter. We got to be permanent, not shelter, but permanent abodes. Some way, somehow. The $1 billion that we froze our hindies off for, Martin Sheen and a lot of the activists came, and we sat on heat grates and to make a statement, it was a Band-Aid, and it didn't cover much. Government is going to have to allocate a lot more now, or they will later, in penal institutions, because these people are very angry. They're raising angry children. The children do not understand why they cannot have a home. And these kids do not want a Schwinn bike and all that. They just, it breaks my heart, because they don't even ask for toys. They just want their mom to have a job and they have a home of their own, even if it's a one-room apartment. And I think that we should at least grant that. I don't like to politic, but I don't think so much should be going into defense. To defend our country is to bring up the next generation, where they'll be productive, right? If we lose one generation, to booze and drugs, we've lost America as it is today. And it's pretty scary, and I don't know how we're going to face these kids later and say, you know, we neglected you when you were young.
There are plenty of people who would argue with you on those issues that you just mentioned, and I'd argue with you on some of them if we had a different format. But
right.
But I appreciate everything you're doing, and you also emphasize so much what individuals should be doing rather than government. What we should do for our friends and neighbors, and how we should be better parents and better friends and so forth. Would you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I think we can affirm these young mothers, especially mothers my age, step in where we see crisis. We've had crisis situations coming through our home, traumatized kids all these years. So I know parents can get it back together, and mothers can get it back together. And I like to bring hope because there is hope. And I think the churches need to be involved. I can't see a church, an edifice. This is kind of my own kick, but I can't see an edifice being built for buku bucks and then shutting its doors to the people that are in need. Father Joseph Manning, I think his last name was, a Holy Ghost Church in Boston, which is a black church in Boston in the black area, stuck his neck out and opened the door to his church, and the board had a fit because they thought it would be ruined by these people that were outside. They came in and they slept on the pews, and they've been doing that for 3 years now. There's not one thing gone wrong with that church. They've kept it clean. In fact, they've taken sacks out in the morning and cleaned the whole radius around there for blocks, like 12 blocks. It's just manicured. These people really appreciate that, and I like to see our churches get involved more that way, and not just federal government. I just really think it's going to be a unified effort.
You also
mentioned... I'm sorry to interrupt. We're out of time. I wish we had another 30 minutes to continue this important conversation, but Beulah, I know I speak for the panel and our staff when we commend you for what you've done. You really have, as Glenn indicated, brought this to the attention in a very different way to the American people. I know it's been at times very difficult for you, but we commend you. Because that is what we believe too, that life is all about, is helping others, and you certainly are an absolutely wonderful example of that. And thank you for taking time to be with our campus and people, our students, our faculty, administration, and with our viewing audience.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be continuing this series that we have on Beyond Darkness, a Human Response. Next week we will continue to discuss another area of individuals who have had great problems, and how we as the human race need to try to move beyond that darkness to be helpful. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Jean Ann Mitchell, who chairs the Convocations Committee at North Idaho College, and all the members of that committee, because they are responsible for this week and this subject, and for our guests that we are having on this program. I would like to invite you to be with us again next week. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.